a woman considered herself the most glamorous bride in Japan. Her wedding was extravagant and ostentatious, and the groom was both wealthy and handsome. The ceremony resembled something out of a romantic idol drama. She stood dignified at the center of the stage, a smile of joy and happiness radiating from her face. The next moment, a large screen broadcast an obscene video of her with another man. The entire room erupted in shock, and paradise was instantly transformed into a humiliating hell. Amid the chaos, a widow left the room, smiling with satisfaction. This was the scene she had meticulously planned for her bride. A year earlier, Mitsu's husband, Yugo, had fallen to his death at work. The official conclusion was suicide. After the funeral, Mitsu told her brother-in-law, Yoji, Yugo was forced to death by the company. The evidence is this recorder in Yugo's briefcase. The recorder was filled with insults, excuses, and threats directed at Yugo by his superiors and colleagues. Recalling Yugo's exhaustion from work not long ago, Mitsu concluded that it was this indifferent company that had driven him to his doom. Mitsu chose not to report the incident to the police or file a lawsuit, instead seeking revenge on these individuals in her own way. Yoji, Yugo's younger brother, also joined the fight. Mitsu spent 6 months teaching herself programming, changed her name, and joined Yugo's company as an intern programmer. With her pretty face and excellent social skills, Mitsu quickly adopted the image of the perfect newcomer. Beneath this mask, Mitsu had a plan for revenge. The first target was the snarling section chief in the recording, a man with a deep sense of inferiority who relied on yelling at his subordinates to establish a sense of superiority. This man, despite his outward appearance of strength, was actually physically frail, relying on green tea and cough medicine to maintain his health. Mitsu exploited this vulnerability and struck with precision. Using her beauty and gentle demeanor, she quickly won the section chief's favor and trust. Mitsu fed the section chief medication in a suffocatingly ambiguous way. Deep in his thoughts, he was unaware that Mitsu had secretly replaced the cough suppressant with a chronic medication. A few weeks later, the medication took effect, and the section chief suddenly collapsed during a tryst. Mitsu promptly handed him his favorite green tea, which left him speechless. Kneeling down, Mitsu stared into his horrified eyes and coldly told him this cough suppressant and green tea were carefully prepared by Yoji for him. While both are not fatal, they can completely paralyze and render a person speechless. Mitsu intended to inflict unbearable pain on the section chief. The section chief would be confined to the hospital for life, crossing off the first name on his revenge list. The second target was the female colleague who constantly played dumb and played the fool. This woman's professional skills were practically non-existent, and her specialty was delegating tasks to subordinates. Yugo had once been her personal laborer. Now that Yugo is deceased, she turns her attention to Mitsu, shifting all of her work onto him. Mitsu, using the pretext of work to build closer relationships, is poised to exploit the female colleague's weaknesses. However, someone intervenes, disrupting Mitsu's plans, the series' protagonist, Makoto. Every time Makoto encounters a female colleague trying to shift the blame onto Mitsu, he ruthlessly stops her. Mitsu is surprised by Makoto's attitude, and he explains that he hopes to address the negative culture within the company. He recalls a senior whom he greatly admired, a kind and capable employee who, because he didn't know how to say no, was exploited to the point of collapse by his colleagues and ultimately passed away. Makoto regrets his silence and resolves to never let such a thing happen again. Mitsu realized the senior he was referring to as Yugo. She had initially thought the company was in tatters, but she discovered that some people still remembered him and felt sorry for him. But this alone wasn't enough for Mitsu to remove Makoto from her revenge plan. For now, she needed to focus on her female colleague. She quickly discovered her colleague's weaknesses, her timidity, her fondness for animals, and her inertial dependence. So she sent Yoji to infiltrate her home and take her cat. Then, she anonymously sent her a package of organs from an unknown source. After discovering her cat was missing and then receiving the package, she was horrified and suffered a mental breakdown, taking a long medical leave. With some free time, Mitsu took the opportunity to deal with another male colleague, Kanzuya, who was prone to shirking responsibility and indulging in gaming. Kanzuya, like her female colleague, treated Yugo like unpaid labor and could be used at will. Mitsu secretly implanted a virus program into Kanzuya's computer. The program automatically collected Kanzuya's embezzlement and gaming bills and anonymously distributed them to the entire company. After the evidence of his crimes was exposed, Kanzuya was fired the next day. At the same time, a female colleague also resigned due to mental breakdown. Soon after, Mitsu asked Yoji to return the female colleague's cat, having achieved her goal of scaring her. The next target was the company president, a typical man who relied on his wife to get to the top. He was a retired football player who was down and out. He became president after marrying a wealthy woman. However, after assuming power, he did nothing, and his daily routine consisted of flirting with his secretary. Later, his wife discovered the affair, and it became public knowledge, but he still harbored evil thoughts and refused to repent. In Mitsu's eyes, this president, who had condoned the company's bad practices, was also the culprit behind Yugo's downfall, so he put him on his revenge list. Mitsu easily controlled this lecherous president. She had merely briefly appeared before the president, and his eyes were instantly fixed on her. Mitsu acted decisively and immediately launched her plan against the president. She pretended to encounter him on his morning jog route, and after working up a sweat, she invited him for coffee and a chat. Mitsu, a self-proclaimed football enthusiast, engaged the president in a deep conversation about football. Driven by his growing power, the president impulsively appointed Mitsu as his personal secretary. Mitsu feigned demur, saying she preferred being a programmer. The president flirted with the idea of being his secretary for a day. To make it impossible for Mitsu to refuse, the president eagerly gave his secretary the day off, and Mitsu reluctantly agreed. Overwhelmed with lust, the president eagerly took Mitsu to a hotel. While the president was showering, Mitsu quickly unlocked his phone, intending to send the hotel room records to the president's wife. Just as he was about to succeed, the president suddenly emerged from the bathroom. Mitsu had to quickly switch gears and coax the president into bed, avoiding detection. After he fell asleep, Mitsu successfully sent the records. Now he only had to wait for the president's wife to discover them. The president's wife, who had zero tolerance for infidelity, would surely give the president a severe lesson. Having accomplished his mission, Mitsu returned to the company. Before she even sat down, she was greeted by the president's secretary, Meiho, who invited Mitsu to dinner that evening, her tone filled with hostility and unquestionable intent. Mitsu suspected she was there to pursue the secretary position. As expected, Meiho, at the dinner table, was implicitly warning Mitsu against even thinking about taking her position. As if to intimidate Mitsu, Meiho even called her boyfriend over. Mitsu didn't want to be an enemy of Meiho. After all, she had nothing to do with Yugo's death, so she left the restaurant calmly. The next day, the company announced the president's resignation. It was rumored that the president's wife had caught evidence of the president's infidelity the previous night and, in a fit of rage, had kicked him out. With the target on her revenge list crossed off, Mitsu felt a sense of satisfaction, a sense of complete vengeance. However, at that moment, Yoji discovered a clue in the company's surveillance footage. On the day Yugo jumped, surveillance footage captured Makoto following Yugo onto the balcony, but only Makoto came down. This meant that Makoto might have been the last person Yugo saw before he died. The next day, Mitsu quietly elicited Makoto's memories. Makoto confessed that he and Yugo had been chatting before he jumped. He complained to Yugo about the despair of working under a snarling manager. Yugo, too, had been constantly exploited by the snarling manager at the company, but he merely responded with a polite smile. However, just after Makoto had left the building, Yugo jumped. Makoto believed his careless complaints were the final straw that broke Yugo's back. Makoto sank into deep remorse, feeling that he had caused Yugo's death. After hearing these words, Mitsu felt as if an invisible force had gripped her heart. What pained her most was that Yugo hadn't said a single word before his death. She walked home from get-off work, heartbroken, with Makoto. As they walked to the overpass, they encountered a little girl about to jump. Makoto quickly grabbed her. The girl, distraught at the discrepancy between her stepfather and mother, was attempting suicide. Makoto was shocked and immediately stopped her. Mitsu calmly asked Makoto to hand the girl over to her so she could persuade her. After Makoto left, Mitsu offered no words of advice to the girl, but simply whispered a few words to her. Then Mitsu pulled out a bottle of clear potion and told her story. Mitsu had lived with her mother since she was a child and had never known her father. Yet, her mother always dressed her up as a doll and took her to meet various men. Over time, Mitsu realized that her mother was using her as bait to attract men. But Mitsu didn't dare disobey and had to do as she was told. Later, her mother married the man she had hoped for, a pervert. Her mother knew everything but turned a blind eye, even blaming Mitsu for angering the man. Mitsu was covered in wounds, but she dared not tell anyone. Yoji and Yugo were Mitsu's cousins, and Mitsu was very close to them, yet she never showed her injuries. The attentive Yoji noticed the bruises on Mitsu's arms and knew what had happened at home. Yoji didn't expose the truth, but secretly brought a bottle of clear potion from school. He told Mitsu to keep it for her own protection and emphasized that it was their secret and not to tell Yugo. That night, Mitsu poured half the potion into her stepfather's red wine, and her stepfather immediately went into convulsions after drinking it. Realizing something was wrong, he tried to pounce on Mitsu, but Yoji arrived just in time and pushed the man down. As Yoji tried to escape, dragging Mitsu along, his mother stopped him. Seeing her husband's unconcern, the mother turned and threatened Mitsu not to leave, saying she still needed him to attract someone else. Mitsu didn't hesitate, splashing the remaining potion in his mother's face. The mother screamed in pain and fell to the ground. Mitsu kicked over the candle, setting the room on fire. Yoji quickly grabbed Mitsu and ran away, promising to keep this secret forever. Mitsu now gave the potion to the little girl, asking her to use it to protect herself. The little girl took the potion and quietly left. A few days later, she found Mitsu and returned the empty bottle, saying she would never be beaten again. From that day on, she would be living in a nursery. Mitsu hugged her, didn't ask what she had done, and simply said goodbye. The next day, Makoto remembered the little girl and asked if Mitsu had persuaded her to give up her quest for revenge. Mitsu didn't answer, but instead asked what he thought of revenge. Makoto explained that he'd also been treated differently by his mother as a child, and after she passed away. He also suffered discrimination at the nursery, but he never considered revenge, believing it was a complete waste of time. Mitsu found this ridiculous. Her revenge plan was nearing completion, and she planned to resign soon. However, at this moment, Yoji made a new discovery from the surveillance footage. He hacked the balcony surveillance, but unfortunately, it only captured the entrance, leaving Yugo's jump in a blind spot. The surveillance showed that Makoto was indeed the only person on the balcony before Yugo's death. From the time Makoto left until Yugo jumped, no one else had gone up there. But Yoji noticed a strange reflection on the floor at the rooftop entrance. He suspected that after Makoto left, another person had gone up to the rooftop, someone who had eluded the surveillance and might have been the last person Yugo had seen before. And this person was likely connected to Yugo's death. Yoji frantically sifted through all the company's surveillance footage that day, quickly identifying 5 people who were likely to have been on the rooftop. 2 of them were known to Mitsu, a female colleague in the office, and the other was Meiho. They had to investigate each one to identify the person. However, a chance encounter quickly led Mitsu to his target. That day, Meiho came to give Mitsu a task. A blinding flash of light flashed before Mitsu's eyes. The source of the light was the crystal sequence on Meiho's handbag. Mitsu was startled and immediately, calmly, asked how long she had owned the handbag. Meiho proudly said it was a prestigious brand, that she had used it for years and rarely let it go. Mitsu was certain that Meiho was the last person to go to the balcony. Mitsu had fought with her before and knew she was extremely cautious, so Mitsu couldn't directly question her about the balcony. So, Mitsu started by investigating Meiho's boyfriend. The man was the son of a powerful official, his family was wealthy and influential, and he was about to marry Meiho. Using a subtle trick, Mitsu got him out, then cleverly tricked him into playing truth or dare, ultimately revealing a shocking secret. The man said Meiho was a cruel and vain woman. She would do whatever it took to eliminate anyone at the company she disliked, and he was Meiho's thug. One time, an honest male colleague failed to complete Meiho's assignment on time. Meiho was furious and ordered him to give the colleague a beating. A few days later, the colleague committed suicide by jumping from a building. Afterwards, Meiho told him that he had witnessed the colleague's suicide, and with a look of disgust, he had called it bad luck, claiming his eyes had been tainted. Mitsu was struck by lightning. She remembered the scars on Yugo's face a few days before his suicide. She immediately understood the honest male colleague was Yugo, and Meiho and her boyfriend were Yugo's murderers. A surge of rage instantly washed over her, and this time, she wanted the murderers to pay 100-fold. Moreover, she also wanted to know what Meiho had done before Yugo's suicide. Meiho was extremely vain and obsessed with conquering men. The best revenge for such a woman was to embarrass her in front of her family and friends. Mitsu and Yoji then began to meticulously plot a revenge trap for Meiho. Mitsu used the pretext of work to gradually build closer ties with Meiho. After gaining her trust, Mitsu introduced Yoji, who was disguised as a talented and elite man, to Meiho. Seduced by Yoji's elite persona, Meiho quickly fell head over heels for him. Meanwhile, Mitsu pretended to be enthusiastically helping Meiho plan her wedding. Mitsu showered Meiho with compliments, making her feel like she was intoxicated. Meiho fell for it, mistaking Mitsu for a close friend. When the time was right, Mitsu skillfully lured Meiho to the balcony. Under Mitsu's patient guidance, Meiho finally revealed the truth about Yugo's suicide. Early that morning, she went to the balcony to smoke a cigarette and looked up to see Yugo standing on the edge. She didn't panic or try to dissuade him, but rather watched the fun unfold. Meiho continued to taunt Yugo, irritating him into jumping. Yugo turned and smiled at her, then leaped. Mitsu shuddered at this. If Meiho had stopped Yugo, he might not have committed suicide. But Meiho's next words chilled Mitsu even more. Meiho complained that Yugo had deliberately died in front of her, and it took her so long to forget the incident. The harsh truth deeply wounded Mitsu and Yoji, and now was the final moment of their revenge. A few days later, Mitsuru resigned from the company, and Meiho's wedding to the son of a wealthy official took place as planned. To show off their wealth, they invited nearly everyone they knew. Mitsuru was naturally among the guests, and Makoto, a colleague, sat next to her. Yoji, disguised as a bartender, infiltrated the scene. He brought a specially crafted drink, specifically for the sons of officials. The drug in it could cause people to lose control and embarrass themselves when stimulated. As Meiho gave a heartfelt speech on stage, Makoto couldn't help but whisper to Mitsuru why he had suddenly resigned. He increasingly felt that Mitsuru had entered the company with a purpose, and now that her mission was complete, she was leaving. Mitsuru gestured to him, silencing him. The drama she had been waiting for was about to begin. The wedding was reaching its climax, and it was time to play the newlyweds suite VCR. Just then, Mitsuru quietly issued a command, and Yoji, hiding in the warehouse, tapped on his computer. The next second, the big screen broadcast an obscene video of her with another man. The room erupted in chaos. Meiho, desperate, hysterical on the stage, and the groom, overcome with excitement, lost control of his bladder in public. Watching this meticulously orchestrated, devastating scene, every cell in Mitsu's body boiled with utter delight. Satisfied, she stood up and left, her steps light with a sense of vengeance. Yoji quietly arrived in his car, coming to bid Mitsuru farewell. Before leaving, he left with a single sentence: "I will always be your accomplice." At this moment, Makoto caught up again, determined to get the truth. Mitsuru no longer concealed the truth and told Makoto that she was Yugo's wife. Her sole purpose in entering the company was revenge against all of them. Makoto was shocked and demanded to know why he had been spared. Mitsuru brought Makoto home and, before Yugo's portrait, they engaged in a passionate embrace. This man, who daily expressed his guilt and self-blame for Yugo, now possessed his widow without a care. In Mitsu's dead heart, this was the bitterest irony of her hypocritical confession of remorse and also her revenge against Yugo. The one person she could never forgive was Yugo. She hated him for giving up his life so easily, for ruthlessly and completely robbing her of all her happiness. This betrayal was far deeper and more painful than any other human harm. And so ended the story.